So the question is, what is burnout? Let's start at the beginning. If you want to know what burnout is, you have to know who she is. Her name is Christina Maslach, and she was what's called an industrial psychologist. That means she studies human interaction in the workplace. And way back in the 1970s, she was involved in research on employee engagement in large employers in the Bay Area of San Francisco. By the way, these were not healthcare employers. And she and her team found engagement in some of the employees, but they also found on the opposite end of a continuum, if engagement's here, they also found engagement's dark twin, burnout. And what they found is there didn't appear to be a penalty to being engaged in your work, to liking what you do, being involved in it. But if you went over to the extremes of burnout, two things became strange. Number one, it started to affect the person's health. Their personal health was affected by their disengagement from work. And secondly, it started to become portable, and the burnout at work started to go home with them and to affect their relationships with their significant other and their family. Dr. Maslach created a test called the Maslach Burnout Inventory, and it's become the gold standard for measuring burnout. Now that test has 22 questions. You may have taken it, but there are actually only 3 fundamental symptoms of burnout. And let's go through them. Number 1 is exhaustion. Sooner or later, somebody will have a little voice in their head say, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. Remember back to our first video? I asked you if you've ever felt that way. Pretty sure you have, because that feeling is universal in all physicians and healthcare providers, and interestingly enough, in all parents. And each of those groups, this happens for the same reason. As a parent, as a healthcare provider, there's going to be a point in time when you're going to be asked to put somebody else's interests ahead of your own, no matter how trashed you are at the time. And because you're a caregiver or a parent, you're going to do that. And in the act of being a helper, you may overextend yourself into burnout. So the first symptom is physical and emotional exhaustion. Symptom number 2, she called depersonalization. What it means is you become cynical and sarcastic about the very people that you're meant to serve. So raise your hand and give me a nod if you've never had a sarcastic thought about a patient. How about this? Raise your hand, give me a nod if you think that venting is healthy. Or how about this? How about, do you recognize that venting feels good, right? Does it feel good for a long time or a short time? Yeah. Why doesn't it last? Why can't you vent about a patient and feel good for 6 months? Then we'd have little venting rooms in all the hospitals around the country. Well, the challenge is this. Venting isn't healthy, it's a sign of burnout. If you feel like you have to vent before you can continue to see patients, believe me, you're in the grips of burnout. Here's what's actually happening. Your energy is drained, and in front of you is another energy vampire patient, and you're putting up a wall between you and them by grabbing a colleague and talking about them like that. You're putting up a wall so they don't suck you completely dry. And it feels good while you're doing it, but as soon as you're done, you're going to walk back out onto the ward or the wing of the service, and the next person you're going to be standing in front of is another patient. And you're going to realize that someplace you violated some rule in that venting. And I call this the first of healthcare's 2 prime directives. Healthcare has 2 prime directives. We all know this one. It goes like this. The patient comes first. You violated the patient comes first, the first of the 2 prime directives. And before we go any further, I want to ask you a quick question. Can the patient come first 24/7, 365, and you have any hope of being a normal human being? Well, the answer, of course, is no. When we're with the patient comes first. But ideally, there's some sort of off switch on that programming, so when you're not with the patient, you can turn that off, take care of yourself, recharge your energy, and come back to work again. I'm going to teach you an off switch in a future lesson in one of the life balance lessons. So, symptom number 2, cynical, sarcastic. Symptom number 3, she called lack of efficacy. What she meant was a feeling of what's the use? My work's not really serving a purpose here. I'm not really making a difference. So the 3 symptoms are exhaustion, cynical and sarcastic. What's the use? Now, you may say, duh, when I say this. I can understand that, but you know what? There are gender differences. Men and women experience burnout differently. Here's the patterns that we've seen in the research. Women tend to experience burnout in the order of those 3 symptoms. You become exhausted, cynical and sarcastic, and doubt the quality of your work. Men have a little different pattern. Men tend to become cynical and sarcastic first, then become exhausted. But you know that 3rd symptom, doubting the quality of their work? Believe it or not, men tend to not experience that 3rd phase. No matter how burned out a man gets, he tends to not doubt the quality of his work. Duh, right? Well, how about this? Another thing that women do much more frequently than men when they're in the throes of burnout is they ask for help. Men, not so much. So if you find yourself or you hear a colleague exhausted, cynical, sarcastic, doubting that their work serves a purpose, they are certainly flirting with the cliff edge of burnout. And it's time to reach out to them and ask them truthfully how they're doing. So those are the 3 symptoms of burnout. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about energy and the difference between stress and burnout and something we call the downward spiral. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, big breath. Go out there and have a great rest of your day.